As a British soldier is pronounced dead in Ukraine, another is wounded, and an MP goes to Ukraine to at least be part of the army supply system or something. I'm not convinced I entirely approve of the sort of mercenary activity, even if Liz Truss endorsed it. It seems to me to be fundamentally wrong. We should be there to support Ukraine, but I don't think we should be getting involved in the actual fighting. We are not at war with Russia, and we need to remember that fact. The conflict in Ukraine has long ceased, however, to be confined to the trenches and the battlegrounds of the Donbass. And what we are witnessing is an evolving shadow war, a conflict that extends into the very heart of Russia itself. And the recent assassination of Armen Sargsyan, a pro-Russian paramilitary leader in a luxury Moscow apartment block, marks yet another significant escalation in this covert battlefield. It's not an isolated incident. Over the past year, we've seen the deaths of senior Russian naval officers, intelligence figures, and now even government officials linked to the war. And while Kyiv has not claimed responsibility, the strategic pattern is impossible to ignore. To understand why Sargsyan was targeted, we need to look at his role within the Russian war machine, a war criminal turned paramilitary leader. Well, we've heard that before. The Ukrainian security service had long accused him of being a crime boss who recruited convicts to fight in Ukraine, and this mirrors the infamous Wagner Group and their model of enlisting prisoners, promising them freedom in exchange for service at the front lines. And a key figure in the Donetsk People's Republic was this man, born in Holivka, a Russian-occupied city in eastern Ukraine. Sargsyan was, even with a name which sounds frankly Armenian, was deeply embedded in the pro-Russian separatist movement since the 2014 annexation of Crimea, and that infiltration of huge numbers of Russians into the Donbass area and into Crimea as well. The ties to the inner circle that he had with Viktor Yanukovych, his links to the fugitive former Ukrainian president, the Kremlin ally, reinforces his importance within the Moscow political military framework and within that network of cronies. And Sargsyan was killed at the entrance hall of the Scarlet Sails residential complex, a high-end Moscow apartment just 12 kilometers from the Kremlin. And the location matters. Moscow has long been seen as an impenetrable fortress with stringent security, yet this attack took place in one of the most secure residential areas. And the method matters. A planted explosive device suggests careful reconnaissance and a high degree of planning. And this was no spontaneous attack. It required inside intelligence, logistical precision, and care, and access. And the aftermath matters. Russian media immediately labelled this an assassination attempt, indicating that the authorities know this was a targeted hit, not a random act of violence. And of course, now we know it wasn't an assassination attempt, it was an assassination success. What is remarkable, of course, is that Ukraine has not claimed responsibility, but then again it rarely does when it comes to targeted assassinations beyond its borders. This isn't the first time a high-profile pro-Russian figure has met an untimely end. Consider these cases. General Valery Trankovsky, killed in a car bomb in Russian-occupied Ukraine in December 2024. Sergei Yevsyukov, a Russian prison official overseeing convict recruitment, also blown up last year. And a senior Russian general and his assistant just a few weeks ago eliminated in Moscow in another covert strike. And each of these deaths demonstrates a significant shift in Ukraine's operational reach from targeting the war front to striking the power structure inside Russia as well. And, of course, also striking at the oil and the gas supplies and the system that is supporting the war. Sergei Efremov, a Russian deputy regional governor, was recently killed in the Kursk region. His vehicle struck by a landmine. It's a remarkable shift. Previously, high-ranking Russian officials were content to support the war from a safe distance, but Efremov was an exception. He had actively rejoined the war effort, leading a volunteer battalion called the Tigers. And his death demonstrates the increasing dangers for Russian elites who align themselves too closely with the war effort. And his presence on the battlefield also suggests that Russia is struggling to maintain military manpower and control, forcing officials into active combat roles. His death was publicly mourned by high-ranking figures like Denis Pushilin, head of the Donetsk People's Republic, indicating his strategic importance. And this suggests that the war is not just expanding geographically, but also redefining the role of Russian leadership. If even a deputy governor is dying in combat, then the Russian state is in desperation mode. While Kyiv officially remains silent on these assassinations, the strategic logic behind them is clear. Targeting command and control, eliminating key military and paramilitary leaders disrupts the Russian war logistics and forces Russian elites to feel the war. Strikes inside Russia force Moscow's power brokers to realize that the war isn't a distant conflict, it can reach them at home. And it sows fear and instability. It's the psychological impact of these attacks that's as significant as the deaths themselves. If Moscow cannot secure its own high-ranking officials, its own high-rankers, what does that say about the Kremlin's ability to protect its citizens? The Kremlin now faces an uncomfortable truth. Ukraine's reach is growing. What was once considered impossible, targeted assassinations within Moscow itself, is now a reality. The implications are too profound. Russian elites are no longer safe. The illusion that this war could remain confined to Ukrainian soil is shattered. Putin's security state looks vulnerable. The fact that a high-profile paramilitary leader was assassinated in Moscow itself undermines Russia's claims of internal stability and safety. And fear is spreading among Russia's political and military ranks. If generals, deputy governors, and intelligence figures are all vulnerable, the paranoia within Russian leadership will only grow. The war in Ukraine is no longer merely a battle for territorial control. It has become a conflict where Moscow itself is the battlefield. And the assassination of Armen Sargsyan, the battlefield death of Sergei Efremov, and the pattern of targeted killings in Moscow and the occupied territories all point to a Ukraine that is not just defending its borders, but actively dismantling the Russian war machine from within. If high-ranking officials are dying in explosions and landmines, what does that say about the future of Russia's war effort? The message is clear. No one is untouchable. And as the conflict drags on, we should expect more figures within Putin's circle to learn that lesson the hard way.